It was a quiet afternoon in a small suburban town. The sun was warm but not too hot, and a gentle breeze moved through the streets. Birds chirped from the trees that lined the sidewalks, and the faint laughter of children playing in yards could be heard. In the middle of this peaceful scene, a young black girl named Aaliyah was making her way to the local park. She moved in her wheelchair, carefully navigating the uneven pavement, her hands gripping the wheels with quiet determination. Aaliyah loved this park. It was her favorite place in the neighborhood, not just because of the swings or the open fields, but because it was where she felt free. Even though she faced challenges in her daily life, moments like this made her feel like any other kid. She was excited to meet a few friends there, hoping for a few hours of laughter and games, a break from the constant reminders of the world being slightly unfair at times. The park itself was calm that day. Parents sat on benches chatting with each other. Joggers ran along the winding paths, and the sounds of playful shouts echoed faintly in the distance. Everything seemed normal, ordinary, almost peaceful. But sometimes, even in the calmest places, trouble finds a way to appear when least expected. It started quietly at first. A distant rumble of engines could be heard, growing steadily louder. Aaliyah glanced over her shoulder as a line of motorcycles appeared at the end of the street. The sound was low and heavy, making the ground under her wheelchair vibrate slightly. A group of bikers rode in, leather jackets glinting in the sunlight, their presence commanding attention. Their motorcycles were loud, their engines roaring like thunder, and it was clear from the way they moved that they were not here just for a ride. They were here to make their presence felt. Aaliyah tried to focus on her path, hoping to reach the park before anything happened, but she couldn't help noticing one biker in particular. He was bigger than the others, with a hardened expression that didn't match the friendly, relaxed atmosphere of the park. His eyes seemed to scan the area with a sense of ownership, and when they landed on Aaliyah, there was a smirk that made her stomach twist with unease. She had faced stares before. People often looked at her wheelchair or whispered when she passed by. But this was different. This biker's gaze was sharp and invasive, full of intimidation. He revved his engine, the sound echoing sharply across the park, and Aaliyah felt a jolt of fear. Her heart started to beat faster. She tried to push forward, focusing on reaching her friends, but the biker was now heading in her direction. The other bikers seemed less focused, laughing and shouting among themselves, but he moved with purpose. He slowed down next to her, letting his motorcycle idle close enough that the vibrations shook the pavement beneath her wheels. Aaliyah looked up, trying to maintain her composure, but the smirk never left his face. "Hey, little girl," he shouted, his voice rough. "What are you doing here all alone?" Aaliyah's hands tightened on her wheels. She tried to ignore him and move past, but the biker edged closer, intentionally blocking her path. Her breathing quickened. She had learned to stay calm in difficult situations, but the fear in her chest was real, gnawing at her confidence. People nearby noticed what was happening, some stopping to watch, others quietly recording on their phones, unsure of what they could do. She looked around, hoping someone would step in, but the expressions of the onlookers were mixed. Some were concerned, others hesitant, and a few were simply curious. No one moved forward. Aaliyah realized she was mostly on her own in this moment. The biker leaned in a little, revving the engine again, the noise startling the birds nearby. "I said, what are you doing here?" he demanded, his tone rising, meant to intimidate. Aaliyah's fingers trembled slightly on the wheels, but she straightened up, refusing to let him see the full extent of her fear. She didn't answer. She simply tried to maneuver around him, looking for a clear path toward the playground where her friends were waiting. But the biker blocked her way, circling around to ensure she couldn't pass. Aaliyah's mind raced. She knew she couldn't let panic take over. She reminded herself that this man had no power over her life, that she had faced challenges far greater than this. But still, the fear in her chest was undeniable. She felt small, exposed, and frustrated all at once. From a distance, two familiar figures were watching. They weren't part of the park's usual crowd. John Cena and The Rock were nearby, filming a charity event for children with disabilities. They had noticed the commotion as soon as it started, and had been observing the bikers' behavior from a short distance. Cena, always aware of people's feelings and safety, exchanged a quick look with The Rock, who nodded silently. They could see the fear in Aaliyah's eyes and knew that immediate action was needed. The biker didn't notice them yet. He was too focused on Aaliyah, enjoying the sense of control he thought he had. He revved his engine again, leaning slightly toward her wheelchair. The sudden noise made her flinch and she almost lost her grip on the wheels. Her heart raced faster. She had no desire to fight or provoke him, only to get past safely and reach her friends. The tension was thick. People in the park began to murmur, sensing that something serious was unfolding. Children stopped playing for a moment, and even the birds seemed to have quieted, as if nature itself was aware of the unease. Aaliyah felt trapped in the middle of this, frustrated that the world sometimes allowed cruelty to linger without consequence. Despite the fear, she didn't cry or scream. Instead, she focused on steadying her breathing and looking for a way to stay calm. Her mind raced through possible strategies, thinking of ways to escape without drawing more attention from the biker. But before she could act, a deep, commanding voice broke through the noise. "Hey, back off," the biker froze. He turned his head slightly, noticing the two towering figures approaching from behind. Cena and The Rock walked with confidence, their presence alone demanding attention. The biker's smirk faltered for the first time. The atmosphere shifted instantly. What had felt like a small personal confrontation was suddenly interrupted by the undeniable authority of people who clearly wouldn't tolerate wrongdoing. Aaliyah glanced up, recognizing the faces. Her eyes widened. She felt a rush of relief mixed with disbelief. In her entire life, she had never imagined someone would intervene so quickly, so decisively. For the first time in what felt like hours, she felt a sense of safety creeping back into her chest. The biker's confidence wavered. He revved the engine once more, but it no longer sounded threatening. Instead, it was hesitant, uncertain. He looked at Cena and The Rock, trying to gauge if they were serious about intervening. The two men didn't speak yet. They simply stood tall, eyes fixed on the biker, letting him realize that his behavior was unacceptable and would not be ignored. Aaliyah's hands relaxed slightly on her wheels. Though her heart continued to beat rapidly, she knew the danger hadn't passed entirely. But the presence of these two men gave her hope. She reminded herself to stay calm, to keep steady, and to trust that this situation would soon be resolved. The biker shifted nervously. He had underestimated the power of simple courage. The courage of standing up for someone who couldn't defend themselves in that moment. And Aaliyah realized that even in the darkest, most frightening situations, there were people willing to step in and make a difference. People who could turn fear into safety with just their presence. The park remained quiet, the tension thick but shifting. Children peered from the swings, parents held their breath, and Aaliyah waited, gripping the wheels of her chair, hoping that help had finally arrived. And in that moment, the stage was set. Something significant was about to happen. A confrontation that would leave an impression not just on Aaliyah, but on everyone who witnessed it. The calm of the park had ended, and what came next would show the true meaning of courage, strength, and standing up for what was right. The moment seemed to stretch in slow motion. Aaliyah's hands tightened around the wheels of her chair as she tried to make sense of what was happening. The biker was circling her like a predator, his engine growling and echoing through the park. Every rev sent vibrations under her wheels, making her fingers tremble slightly. She felt trapped, unsure of which way to go, and the fear in her chest grew heavier with each second. The biker leaned closer, his smirk widening. He shouted something cruel, mocking her disability, trying to make her feel small, like she didn't belong in the park. Aaliyah didn't respond. She knew that any sign of fear could encourage him, so she focused on staying calm, pushing forward slowly, hoping for a clear path to the playground. But he blocked her way, moving deliberately to make sure she couldn't pass. Around them, the park was alive with tension. Some parents whispered to each other, unsure whether to intervene. A few people recorded the scene on their phones, more out of curiosity than courage. Children paused their games, watching silently from a distance. Aaliyah could hear their muted whispers, the collective unease of people witnessing something they didn't know how to stop. The world suddenly felt larger and harsher, and she felt very small in comparison. Her mind raced with thoughts. Why does someone think it's okay to treat another person like this? She thought about all the times people had stared, made comments, or treated her differently because of her wheelchair. But this was different. This felt aggressive, dangerous, intentional. The fear in her chest tightened and a lump formed in her throat. Then she noticed them again. Two figures moving toward the scene. Cena and The Rock. Even from a distance, they seemed larger than life. their presence commanding attention without a single word. Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat. Relief began to flow through her, but it was tempered with caution. She didn't want to hope too quickly because the biker's aggression still loomed over her. The biker, still focused on her, didn't see them at first. He revved his engine again, trying to make her flinch. "What are you doing here all alone?" he shouted, his voice carrying through the park like a warning. He leaned closer, his eyes scanning her face, looking for a reaction. Aaliyah forced herself to look straight ahead, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. She tried to navigate around him, pushing the wheels carefully to avoid tipping over on the uneven pavement. But the biker anticipated her movements, positioning his bike to keep her trapped. Every turn she made, he adjusted his path to block her, his engine roaring each time she tried to escape. The situation escalated quickly. Aaliyah's heart pounded, and for a moment she considered screaming for help, but she knew that would only provoke him further. She felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. It wasn't fair that she had to defend herself just by existing in the park. And yet, despite the fear and the tension, she refused to show him that he had succeeded in intimidating her. The crowd around them grew slightly larger. People whispered to one another, debating whether they should intervene or call the police. Some were paralyzed by fear, others by uncertainty, unsure of how to handle someone so aggressive on a motorcycle. The noise of engines combined with the voices of bystanders created a chaotic atmosphere. Aaliyah felt like the center of a storm, the eye where everything was swirling around her. From a short distance, Cena and The Rock finally stepped forward. They walked with calm confidence, their eyes focused on the biker. Cena's expression was serious but controlled, while The Rock's presence alone seemed to make the air heavier, commanding attention without a single word. People in the crowd began to notice them, and the biker, finally sensing something different, glanced over his shoulder. At first, he didn't recognize who they were. He laughed nervously, thinking perhaps they were just parkgoers or event staff. But as they moved closer, it became clear that these were no ordinary men. Cena's steps were measured, deliberate, and confident, while The Rock's gaze was firm and unwavering. The biker's smirk faltered slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face for the first time. "You need to stop," Cena said, his voice steady but firm. It carried easily over the noise of the engine, commanding attention. The biker laughed, a harsh, unconvincing sound. "Who's going to make me?" he shouted, revving his engine again. But there was a hint of hesitation now, a crack in the armor of his bravado. The Rock moved forward, his presence immense and imposing. He didn't yell. He didn't make threats. He simply stood tall, eyes fixed on the biker, sending a clear message. Intimidation wouldn't work here, not today. The biker glanced around, noticing the growing crowd and the two men standing firmly between him and Aaliyah. He realized that whatever plan he had, it was falling apart. Aaliyah felt a small wave of hope. She looked at Cena and The Rock, feeling a sense of protection she hadn't experienced before. The fear in her chest didn't disappear entirely, but it became more manageable. She could finally breathe a little easier, knowing that she wasn't facing this alone. The biker hesitated, unsure of how to react. He wanted to maintain his image of control, but the presence of Cena and The Rock was too strong to ignore. The crowd around them sensed the shift in energy. Whispers turned into quiet murmurs of support for Aaliyah, as people realized that she was no longer alone. For the first time, the biker's laughter sounded forced. He tried to rev the engine as if to assert his dominance, but the sound now felt small, weak against the commanding presence of the two men. He looked at Aaliyah again, searching for fear, but found only quiet determination and a newfound courage that had begun to blossom in her chest. Cena took a deliberate step closer, positioning himself between Aaliyah and the biker. "You don't treat people this way," he said calmly. The words were simple but heavy with authority. The biker blinked, taken aback by the directness. He was used to scaring people into submission, not being confronted with calm, unwavering authority. The Rock shifted slightly, his presence alone reinforcing Cena's words. There was no aggression in his stance, only strength and confidence. The biker's hands twitched on the handlebars, and for a moment, it seemed like he was reconsidering his actions. The roar of his motorcycle engine quieted, a faint sign that he was beginning to understand he was outmatched. Aaliyah watched, her heart still racing, but feeling a growing sense of relief. The two men had not rushed in violently. but their presence alone had changed the dynamic entirely. It was a lesson in courage and authority, how standing firm for what is right can stop someone from causing harm, without anyone needing to fight. The crowd around them seemed to relax slightly as well. Parents and bystanders exchanged glances, some nodding to one another, silently thanking Cena and The Rock for their intervention. Children peered from behind benches and trees, witnessing a real-life example of courage and protection. Aaliyah's friends, who had just arrived at the playground, noticed the scene and felt awe at the calm but powerful way the situation was unfolding. The biker finally spoke, his voice uncertain now. I didn't mean, he started, but he didn't finish. The words felt empty, unconvincing, and unnecessary. Cena and The Rock simply remained still, their eyes on him, letting him realize that an apology alone wouldn't erase what he had done. The message was clear. Intimidation had no place here, and Aaliyah deserved respect and safety. Aaliyah felt a mixture of emotions, relief, disbelief, and a growing sense of empowerment. She realized that fear could be confronted, that help could come from unexpected places, and that courage wasn't always about physical strength. Sometimes it was about standing firm, being calm, and showing that wrongdoing would not be tolerated. The biker's hands shook slightly on the handlebars, and for the first time, he looked small in the eyes of everyone around him. He had tried to project power and dominance, but it had crumbled in the presence of true authority and empathy. He hesitated, then finally backed his motorcycle away slowly, muttering something that no one could hear. As he rode off, the crowd exhaled collectively. The tension in the park dissipated, replaced by a sense of relief and admiration. Aaliyah remained where she was, still gripping the wheels of her chair, but now with a newfound confidence. She had faced fear head-on, and she had not been alone. The kindness and courage of strangers, who had become protectors in that moment, had changed everything. Cena and The Rock walked over to her side, offering smiles and words of encouragement. "You did great," Cena said simply, making sure she knew that she was not at fault. The Rock nodded, adding, "Never let anyone make you feel small. You're stronger than you know." Aaliyah smiled, her heart finally settling. The world could be cruel, she realized, but there were also people willing to step up, to protect and to remind others of the right way to act. She felt a spark of hope, knowing that even in moments of fear and intimidation, courage, kindness, and presence could make all the difference. The biker paused for a moment, his hands tight on the handlebars. The roar of his engine had quieted, replaced by an uneasy silence. He looked around, suddenly aware of the crowd that had formed. People were watching him closely now, some whispering to one another, others holding their phones like evidence. Their eyes were on him, and more importantly, so were John Cena and The Rock. Aaliyah felt her chest heaving slightly, but not from fear alone. Relief mingled with a cautious hope. She had never expected help to arrive so quickly, and seeing Cena and The Rock standing firm gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. She had faced teasing, stares, and whispers all her life, but this moment was different. This wasn't just about words, it was about power used to protect, not to intimidate. Cena stepped closer, his voice calm but commanding. "You need to step back and leave. This behavior is not acceptable," he said, his tone firm but not aggressive. The biker's smirk wavered. He laughed nervously, trying to mask his fear. "And what if I don't?" he muttered, his voice shaky now. The biker tried to rev his engine, but the sound seemed smaller, weaker, almost insignificant compared to the presence of the two men. The Rock moved slightly to Cena's side, positioning himself to block any path the biker might take toward Aaliyah. His stance was solid and unyielding, the kind of presence that made it clear he wasn't bluffing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His mere stance said everything. "This ends now." The biker's eyes darted between Aaliyah, Cena, and The Rock, and for the first time, uncertainty replaced arrogance. Aaliyah tried to remain calm. Her hands rested lightly on her wheelchair wheels, but her heart was still racing. She had never experienced a moment like this, one that combined fear, relief, and admiration all at once. She realized that courage could take many forms. Sometimes it was loud and visible, like the roar of an engine, but other times it was calm, firm, and steady, like the presence of Cena and The Rock standing up for what was right. The biker's confidence started to crumble. He had believed that his size, his motorcycle, and his loud voice were enough to intimidate anyone. But he hadn't counted on witnesses who were unafraid to intervene. The crowd watched quietly, the tension thick but shifting. The people who had hesitated earlier now whispered amongst themselves, some nodding subtly, recognizing that the balance of power had changed. "Listen," Cena continued, his tone unwavering. "You can leave peacefully, or you can make this worse for yourself. The choice is yours." The biker's hands tightened on the handlebars. He could feel the eyes of the entire park on him. He realized he had miscalculated. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was about accountability. Aaliyah noticed a flicker of fear in his eyes. He had expected silence or maybe fear, but not intervention. He had expected Aaliyah to flinch, cry, or scream, but she hadn't. She had stayed steady, determined. And now, standing between her and his aggressive behavior were two of the most recognizable figures of courage and strength. The Rock's expression softened slightly as he addressed the biker directly. "You don't scare anyone here. You only make yourself look small." His words were simple, but their weight was undeniable. The biker's smirk disappeared completely. He swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. The laughter and arrogance that had filled his voice moments ago were gone, replaced by an awkward silence that made him shift nervously on his motorcycle. Aaliyah felt a surge of confidence. She realized that courage wasn't just for the heroes who had arrived. She could be brave too. She straightened slightly in her wheelchair, her chin lifting. She had been scared, yes, but she had stayed calm. She had stayed herself, and now she was witnessing justice unfold in front of her. It was a powerful lesson. Standing tall in the face of intimidation mattered, no matter your size or circumstances. The biker tried to rev the engine again, a feeble attempt to reclaim control. But it was clear that it was an act of desperation. Cena stepped forward slightly, his presence commanding, his eyes fixed on the biker. The Rock mirrored his movement, and together they created a barrier of authority and protection. It wasn't just physical. It was a declaration that bullying, intimidation, and cruelty had no place here. The crowd could sense the shift in energy. What had started as a moment of fear for Aaliyah was now a lesson in courage for everyone watching. Parents held their children closer, some of them whispering quietly about what they were witnessing. Teenagers lowered their phones, realizing that some moments are too real, too significant to simply record. And children, those with the purest eyes, watched in awe, understanding something instinctively about bravery and standing up for what is right. Aaliyah's mind raced, but she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she hadn't backed down. Even in fear, she had remained calm. Even when faced with aggression, she had stayed herself. And now she realized courage didn't always mean confronting the threat alone. It could mean letting others stand with you and amplify the strength you already had. The biker looked around, finally aware that the park was no longer a stage for his intimidation. The people he had hoped to scare were united, silent but powerful, and his arrogance had evaporated. His hands shook slightly on the handlebars, and he started to back his motorcycle a few steps. Every inch he moved away felt like a small victory for Aaliyah, and a lesson for the crowd about the power of presence and intervention. Cena spoke again, this time in a calmer, reassuring voice directed at Aaliyah. "You did the right thing by staying calm. You didn't give him the satisfaction of fear. That matters." The Rock nodded in agreement, adding, "And remember, never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Strength comes in many forms, and you're showing it right now." Aaliyah's heart swelled with gratitude. She felt proud, not just because the threat had been addressed, but because she had remained composed. The lesson was deeper than fear. It was about resilience, about standing firm, and about the way others' courage could support your own. She realized that true bravery sometimes looks quiet, but it is powerful all the same. The biker hesitated, his attempts to intimidate now completely undermined. He looked at Aaliyah one last time, perhaps trying to gauge if she would react, but there was nothing to provoke him. Her calmness and the presence of Cena and the Rock had shifted the balance entirely. Finally, he muttered something under his breath, started the engine, and rode off slowly, leaving behind the echo of his failed intimidation. As he disappeared down the street, the crowd released a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. The tension that had hung over the park dissipated, replaced by relief and admiration. Aaliyah remained where she was, gripping the wheels of her chair, her chest still heaving but with a growing sense of empowerment. She had faced fear directly, and she had not been alone. Cena and The Rock stayed beside her, smiling warmly. Cena said, "You showed a lot of strength today. Not everyone can stay calm in such a situation." The Rock added, "And you should know, courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady and unyielding, just like you showed." Aaliyah smiled, a mix of relief, pride, and newfound confidence shining in her eyes. She had learned that courage could be supported, that standing firm mattered, and that even in moments of fear, there were people willing to step in for what is right. The lesson was clear. Bravery comes in many forms, and it could inspire everyone who witnessed it. The crowd began to disperse slowly, conversations resuming, but the lesson lingered. People had seen courage, protection, and the impact of standing up for someone who couldn't defend themselves at that moment. Aaliyah realized that even in a world that could be cruel, there were always people willing to make a difference, and sometimes those moments of intervention could transform fear into safety and intimidation into inspiration. Aaliyah's friends finally reached her, their eyes wide as they took in the scene. They didn't need words to understand what had just happened. The relief on her face, the calm authority of Cena and The Rock, and the retreat of the biker told the entire story. She had been safe, she had been supported, and she had been part of something larger, a lesson in courage for everyone who had watched. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Aaliyah wheeled herself toward her friends. She felt lighter, braver, and more confident than she had in a long time. The fear had been real, the intimidation had been threatening, but the experience had shown her that courage and protection could appear when you least expected it. The biker's engine growled one last time, but it lacked the confidence it had before. He had started the confrontation with swagger, revving his bike to intimidate, laughing to assert dominance, but now the laughter had disappeared, replaced by uncertainty. Every eye in the park was on him, and most importantly, Cena and The Rock were standing firm between him and Aaliyah. Their presence alone was enough to make him reconsider his actions. Aaliyah could feel the shift in the air. The fear that had gripped her moments ago was now transforming into cautious relief. She realized that this man who had seemed so threatening was now visibly shrinking under the quiet power of two men who represented more than just strength. They represented fairness, justice, and courage. She had stayed composed, and now the situation was turning in her favor. Cena's voice rang out calm and authoritative. "You can leave now. There is no need to escalate this." His tone was firm, not angry, yet it carried a weight that made the biker hesitate. The Rock moved slightly closer, his eyes never leaving the man, his presence creating a solid barrier that left no room for intimidation. The biker's bravado was fading, replaced by the realization that he had misjudged the situation entirely. For a moment, the biker seemed to contemplate defiance. He started to rev the engine as if trying one last time to assert himself. But the crowd, silent now, watched closely. Their collective gaze added pressure. It was clear that the power dynamic had completely shifted. He wasn't just facing Aaliyah anymore, he was facing a united front, a demonstration of courage that didn't rely on aggression. Aaliyah felt a small sense of pride. She had stayed calm, navigated the moment as best as she could, and now she was witnessing the power of courage in action. She realized something important. Sometimes courage is quiet and sometimes it is shared. Her bravery had not been passive. It had drawn support, amplified by the presence of people willing to stand with her. The biker's hands tightened nervously on the handlebars. He glanced around, noticing the phones capturing the scene, the people watching silently, the children observing with wide eyes. He realized that his actions would be remembered, recorded, and judged. His attempt at intimidation was failing, and he could feel it. The engine's roar, once loud and threatening, now sounded hollow, echoing his unease rather than his power. Cena took another step forward, his voice steady. "No one has the right to intimidate someone, especially someone who hasn't done anything wrong. You need to leave now." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of authority. The biker's eyes flickered toward him, and then to The Rock, whose silence spoke louder than words ever could. Aaliyah noticed the subtle change in his posture. He was no longer leaning forward aggressively. He had stopped circling her. His confidence, which had seemed unshakable moments ago, was now faltering. He was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that true strength doesn't come from loud engines or threats. It comes from standing for what is right and protecting those who can't protect themselves. The crowd began to sense the resolution approaching. Whispers filled the air, small murmurs of relief and admiration for what they were witnessing. Alia's friends, who had just reached the playground, stared in awe. They could see that the situation was being handled without violence, without chaos, simply with courage and presence. It was a powerful lesson in how to confront wrong without escalating it further. The biker muttered something under his breath, his words barely audible. He seemed to be searching for an excuse, a way to regain his lost confidence, but there was none. The presence of Cena and the Rock, combined with the calm strength of Alia, had left him with no room to maneuver. His intimidation had failed, and he was fully aware of it now. He started the motorcycle and slowly began to move away, the engine making less noise than before. His shoulders were slightly hunched, a clear sign of defeat. Alia felt a sense of vindication, not from revenge, but from the recognition that standing firm and remaining calm had shifted the entire scenario. She had faced fear and it had not won. Cena and the Rock stayed beside her, their expressions calm but proud. Cena's voice was gentle now, offering reassurance. You handled that very well. You didn't let fear control you and you stayed strong. That's something to be proud of. The Rock nodded, adding, and remember, being brave isn't just about physical strength. It's about standing up for yourself and letting the right people support you when needed. Alia smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. The fear had been real, but so had the support. She realized that courage wasn't always about fighting. It was about presence, resilience, and knowing when to accept help. The two men had not just protected her, they had amplified the strength she already possessed. The crowd began to relax as the tension lifted. Parents led their children back to their activities, joggers resumed their routes, and the park slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Yet the moment had left a lasting impression. People had witnessed courage, fairness, and protection in a way that didn't rely on violence. It was a lesson that would linger in the minds of those who had watched. Alia's friends reached her, their eyes wide and their voices filled with concern and admiration. They didn't need to ask what had happened. Her calm demeanor, the presence of Cena and the Rock, and the retreat of the biker told the story all on its own. She felt a mixture of relief and pride, knowing that she had faced fear and come through it with dignity. Cena knelt slightly to speak at her level. You were very brave today. Remember this moment and let it remind you of how strong you can be. The Rock added, smiling, and always know it's okay to let others help. Courage doesn't mean facing everything alone. Alia nodded, understanding deeply the message being shared. She had always known that life could be challenging, that people could be cruel. But today she had seen the power of support and bravery combined. It wasn't just about her safety. It was about the lesson that anyone could stand up against wrong when they had the courage and the right support. The biker had disappeared from view, leaving behind only the echo of what had been. But his presence and the way he had been confronted left a lasting lesson for the entire park. People whispered quietly among themselves, discussing how unexpected courage and calm authority could change a situation without anyone getting hurt. It was a lesson in human decency, in intervention, and in the way communities could come together, even silently, to protect the vulnerable. Alia wheeled herself closer to her friends, feeling lighter than she had all day. The sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park. The shadows seemed longer, but the fear of the earlier encounter felt smaller, diminished by the courage she had witnessed. She realized that even in moments of danger or intimidation, there could be heroes, sometimes quiet, sometimes famous, but always human in their courage and empathy. Cena and the Rock stayed for a few moments, ensuring Alia was okay and that the situation was fully resolved. They smiled, exchanged a few words with the parents nearby, and slowly began to walk away, leaving Alia with a memory she would never forget. Their intervention had been decisive but calm, protective but respectful, and above all, empowering for the girl at the center of the confrontation. Alia sat quietly for a moment, taking in what had happened. She felt a mixture of emotions, fear, relief, admiration, and pride. She had faced a threatening situation and remained composed. She had witnessed courage in action. And most importantly, she had learned that standing firm, staying calm, and accepting support could change even the most intimidating encounters. As the park returned to its usual rhythm, Alia wheeled herself toward her friends. They surrounded her, talking excitedly, still processing what had just happened. She smiled, feeling a sense of connection, not just with her friends, but with the people who had silently watched, the witnesses who had understood the importance of standing together. The lesson of the day was clear. Fear can be confronted, intimidation can be challenged, and courage can come in many forms. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is shared, and sometimes it is as simple as standing firm and letting the right people step in. For Aaliyah, the memory would linger, not as a moment of fear, but as a moment of empowerment, courage, and hope. The sun was slowly lowering in the sky, casting a warm golden glow across the park. Shadows stretched long over the paths and fields, but the tension that had gripped the park earlier had completely dissipated. Aaliyah sat quietly in her wheelchair, taking in everything that had just happened. She could still feel her heartbeat slowing down, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading, replaced by a mix of relief, awe, and something that felt like pride. She looked around at her friends, who were now clustered nearby, their faces full of concern and admiration. They asked her questions, softly and eagerly, about what had happened while she was alone with the biker. Aaliyah smiled faintly, trying to explain the fear she had felt, but also the courage she had discovered within herself. She realized that even in the darkest moments, strength could emerge from the quietest places. The crowd that had gathered earlier was now dispersing slowly, but their whispers carried a sense of respect and appreciation for what they had witnessed. People were talking about courage, about the importance of standing up against intimidation, and about the way Aaliyah had remained calm throughout. Even those who hadn't spoken or acted directly had absorbed a lesson that would stay with them long after they left the park. Aaliyah reflected on the moment the two men had stepped forward. John Cena and The Rock hadn't charged in recklessly or yelled at the biker. Instead, they had used their presence, calm authority, and unwavering focus to stop him. It was a lesson in power and responsibility, showing her that true strength isn't about being loud or aggressive, it's about protecting others, making the right choice and showing courage when it matters most. She remembered how her fear had been real, how her hands had shaken slightly on the wheels of her chair, how her heart had raced as the biker circled her, but she also remembered how she had stayed composed, refusing to let him see her weakness. That choice, small and quiet, had mattered more than she could have imagined. Her bravery had been magnified by the courage of those who had stepped in to help. The biker was gone now, his attempt at intimidation fading into memory, but the lesson he had left behind was clear. He had underestimated the power of courage and the strength of standing together. Aaliyah understood that sometimes people bully because they feel powerful when others appear weak. But when faced with real courage, even the loudest threats could collapse. Her friends gathered around her, and one of them reached out to touch her shoulder gently. "You were amazing," they said, their voice full of awe. "You didn't let him scare you, and you stayed so calm." Aaliyah nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just about what she had endured. It was about how she had faced it, how she had kept her dignity, and how the right support could make all the difference. Cena and The Rock stayed with her for a few more moments, ensuring she was okay and giving words of encouragement. Cena spoke first, his tone gentle but firm. "Remember this moment. You were strong, calm, and brave. You showed that courage doesn't always mean fighting back, it means standing firm and knowing when to let others help." The Rock added, "You don't need to face everything alone. Let people support you when it's right and never let anyone make you feel small." That's real strength. Aaliyah felt a surge of gratitude. She had never imagined that she would be supported in such a powerful way. For years she had faced challenges and people's stares, whispers, and cruel comments, but now she realized that even in a world that could feel